Welcome to Business Insider's Master Your Money live digital bootcamp, How to Be a Smarter Investor Now, presented by Fidelity. Here's our host, Tanza Loudenbeck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanza Loudenbeck, and I am the personal finance correspondent at Business Insider. I'm also a candidate for the CFP certification. Today, we're talking about investing. And I'll be honest, I never desired to be an investor. I never really thought I'd be any good at it. But shortly after starting my first job out of college, here at Business Insider, I was introduced to the 401k. And let me tell you, a light bulb went off. I realized you don't have to be a sophisticated stock picker or watch market news or even have a trading account to be a good investor. You really just need patience, discipline, and a little bit of money. And that's why we're here today, to talk about being a smarter investor using the tools you have. This event is part of Business Insider's Master Your Money series. Master Your Money was designed to help millennials take charge of our financial future. And we're so lucky to be joined by two personal finance experts today who are going to help us do just that. Kelly Lannon is the Vice President of Young Investors for Personal Investing at Fidelity Investments. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Tanza. How you doing today? Thank you so much for having me. And as always, it's really good to see you again.
I'm so excited you're here with us. We're also joined by Kevin Matthews, the founder of Building Bread, where he coaches new investors. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to get to talk to you about investing today. And to all the viewers, we want your input too. So send in your questions using the Q&A box on your screen, and I'll get them to Kevin and Kelly. While they can't answer questions about your specific financial situation, questions about strategy are fair game. We won't have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of this event, so send your questions in whenever you have them. I've got a question for Kevin to start. I'm dying to know what your first investing experience was like and what you took away from it.
Yeah, my very first investing experience, I was a junior at Hampton University, and I had a finance professor, and this was right after, it's like 2010 or so right after the financial crisis. And he said, "Hey, look, you need to buy bank stocks." He told the entire class, "Everybody just go buy bank stocks. They're never going to stay down forever." And I took the only $300 I had, I put it in a few bank stocks and just left it there, thinking that I would be a millionaire overnight. After 3 weeks, I didn't make any money. I actually lost like $7 or $8. I was upset and I sold everything based on that. So my lesson was, don't just take advice of random people, but also understand what you're investing in and why. And that, investing is not like a lotto ticket. And that's definitely what I thought the very first time that I started investing.
That's a great takeaway lesson. I think I got really lucky with my situation to get thrown into a 401k, which kind of does the work for you. So if you're just joining us, we are talking about investing today, and you can send your questions in using the Q&A box on your screen. Kelly, I know that your first investing experience, like mine, had something to do with a 401k. What happened?
Yes, no, I could definitely relate to your experience, Tanza. I only wish the light bulb went off like it did for you, because I have to be honest, I didn't actually realize that I was even investing, even though I had a 401k through my job at Fidelity, until probably like a year or two later when someone told me that. And as I've actually shared before, if anyone was able to tune in to the last session of Master Your Money, we see this in a lot of people, is that people don't necessarily equate saving for your retirement as actually investing in your retirement. There's actually a huge gap in mind share. 60% of millennials out there have some sort of investment account, yet less than 10% of them actually consider themselves to be an investor. So my investing story, man, I wish I could go back because I guess it didn't really even become a story until a few years later when that light bulb went off for me. And I was like, holy crap, I am investing. I have 401k. So a little bit different from you, but it was definitely through the workplace, which I think for a lot of people out there, that does happen to be their first experience when it does come with investing. So I just want to say to all of you guys listening, If you have a 401k through your workplace, you have an employer-sponsored retirement plan, congratulations, pat yourself on the back. You're an investor, and maybe this can be your first investing story as well.
That's great. Thanks, Kelly. So 401ks make me think of hands-off investing and passive investing. Kevin, what's the difference between an active investor and a passive investor, and how does someone know which one they are?
Yeah, so I'll start with the back end of that question. So a passive investor is someone who enjoys having their investments on autopilot. So if you're that type of person that doesn't want to be more hands-on, and hands-on is an active investor, then those are the types of people or types of investments that you want to try and pursue. So again, passive, that's kind of like index funds, kind of hands-off, autopilot, don't really have to worry about it. You may check up on it 1 to 4 times a year. An active investor is someone who is actively checking the market, actively trying to figure out what is the best thing at that point in time. So it's really more of a personality fit and what fits for you. And most people kind of fit somewhere in between.
We have a question from the audience. Someone is asking if you can explain the difference between a Roth IRA and a 401k and which is better. Kelly, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. Well, to start, I wouldn't say one is better than the other. In fact, some people actually have both. And I guess the most important thing to note is that usually your 401k, it's actually employer sponsored retirement plan, meaning you're actually getting that account through your workplace. So typically you have to have a job that actually cares enough about you, which is great because there's a lot of companies out there that do, that offer an employer sponsored retirement plan that can help you get started with your retirement. So that's a big difference there. An IRA is an individual retirement account, meaning this is something that you can start outside the workplace. Now, I know that you specifically asked about a Roth IRA. In fact, there's also Roth 401ks, but the biggest difference comes with the tax benefits. With a Roth IRA, the tax benefits actually come a little bit later. In fact, I think a lot of younger people out there have probably heard, oh, a Roth IRA might be a better option for when you're younger. And the main reason being, again, talking at a very high level, is that with a Roth IRA, you're actually paying taxes to the money that you're putting into that account. That money grows year over year tax-free. And then when you take it out, because you've already paid the taxes on it, you usually don't have to pay them again, which is really nice. A traditional IRA differs in the fact that money going into the account, you're not paying taxes on that to start. Like a Roth, it goes tax-free year over year. And then it's when you take that money out that then you then have to pay the taxes. So because everyone is listening on this call is going to be a millionaire one day, and maybe is at a lower tax bracket today, a Roth could be a good option for you to consider if you don't have access to a retirement account through your workplace, or maybe you want to supplement your workplace account if you're already maxing that out.
And Kelly, I know there can be some benefits to a Roth IRA in terms of distributions, and you don't necessarily have to be retired to take them. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. But I would urge people to definitely pause before even considering taking any money out of any retirement account. It has that name on it on purpose. It's for your retirement. You want to keep it in there when you are ready for retire, so no one on this call has to work until they're 120 years old. I mean, who really wants that? But one of the benefits to a Roth IRA, and it really has to do with the taxes because you already paid the taxes, is that it is more flexible in terms of when you can take that money out. Usually, if you've had that money in there for 5 years, you can actually take that money out without having to pay a penalty on that, which is different than traditional IRAs.
Got it. And we have another audience question. Someone is asking, is there a way to convert an existing traditional 401k or IRA into a Roth version?
Yes, there is a way. However, I would just urge everyone, because I'm not an expert in this, and maybe I'd even pass this off to Kevin if you have a better answer. I would just make sure that you understand the rules of doing that. Because of the tax implications, you may be able to do that, you may not. The other important thing to note with a Roth IRA is that you're only eligible to that if you are of a certain income level. So if you are making too much money, for example, you might not be eligible for a Roth. So that's another important question to answer. But my buddy Kevin, I will pass it off to you if you have a better response than me.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. You wanna make sure that you are, 1, eligible, and then 2, aware of any tax implications that may occur. But basically, there are a lot of different factors. So 1, do you still work at the place you're trying to roll over or convert? That's another thing that you'll need to figure out. So just make sure that you cross all your I's and dot all your T's. Actually, that's reversed. But make sure that you are very sure that you're able to do it and that you're aware of any tax complications. So make sure that you speak to your accountant and your financial planner.
Yeah, and just to add
That's great
on,
advice.
to that too, Kevin, is that if you don't have an accountant, if you don't have a financial planner, and you do have a plan through the workplace, usually you can actually reach out to the plan sponsor. And that's actually a benefit that a lot of workplace plans have, that you can call your plan sponsor directly up. They're knowledgeable about your account, they're knowledgeable about your plans, and they can actually help answer some questions to you.
So, Kevin, there's this old rule of thumb that I heard when I first started investing, and I still hear often. And I don't know if it's an old rule of thumb, but I guess that's what I'm asking you. The rule is that you should subtract your age from 100, and the remaining number is the percentage of your portfolio that should be invested in stocks. Can you explain the logic behind that rule of thumb and whether or not someone should follow it?
Yeah, so the first thing is, with any rule of thumb, just note that it is a rule of thumb and it doesn't always apply to your specific situation and what you're trying to do as an investor. But for the rule of 100, I wouldn't say it's dead and gone, but it's definitely gained some weight as I have in quarantine. And the more updated rule of thumb is the rule of 110. So if I'm 30, I subtract 110 from 30, that gives me 80%. So in theory, 80% of my money should be in stocks, the other 20% should be in bonds. And again, it's just a rule of thumb. It is generally, I would say, relatively accurate to kind of get you in the right risk tolerance, which kind of balance you between growth and security. The best way to do it is by taking a what's called a risk tolerance questionnaire. You can search for these. These are very common, especially if you have one at your workplace through your 401k. They usually have one, or at any large brokerage firm too. You can ask for one. You'll fill out maybe 9 or 10 questions, and it'll tell you should be 80% stocks, 20% bonds. But the rule of 110 does get you relatively close to where most investors should be.
But Kevin, just to again pile on to your point, I
Mhm.
know I get it. I'm sure you get it too. I wish that there was a rule of thumb. I wish sometimes there was a one size fits all, or a very, strict manual for how to get started with investing. But unfortunately, there's not. And you do want to make
Right.
sure you take into consideration everything that you just said. What's your risk tolerance? What's your time horizon? What are your financial goals? And before you can lean into any rule of thumb, as you noted, once you actually take the time and pause and answer those, it can help you determine, how you could get started.
Those are both great points. We have an audience question. Someone's asking, is it okay to have several open 401ks with different banks? And should you roll over your 401ks into one? I'm assuming when you leave a job and you have multiple 401ks open, how should someone handle that? Kevin?
Yeah, so there's always the it depends. So it is, you can have as many 401ks from previous jobs if you choose. However, in most cases, it is a best practice to consolidate those, only because it's difficult to keep track of everything. One part of any personal finance strategy or any investing strategy is staying organized. So there is no rule against leaving them out there. You don't have to roll it over, but again, it's a best practice just to keep everything in line and roll things over as you go. But again, it's just a general best practice. Everyone is different. Some people prefer to have those out there, but it is a lot harder to make sure that you're organized and make sure that your investments are always updated, because once you leave a job, you don't always have them on speed dial to make sure that your 401k is properly allocated and that you have everything in line. But that's, again, a best practice. The other benefit of rolling it over is that you can roll it over and still contribute if you move it to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA if you do that conversion. So that's the good thing too. Normally, if you leave a job, you have a 401k there, you're not allowed to continue to contribute to it. So that's another reason for, one, consolidation and organization, and two, the ability to continue to contribute to those accounts.
Another consideration would also be fees, right?
hmm
And when you have
Yeah.
more accounts, you're paying fees in each account versus just paying one fee on a larger balance.
Yeah, I think that's like a rule in general is just always understand exactly what you're paying for any type of investment. But the other thing I do want to know, because, I don't know about anyone out there, but this actually happened to a friend of mine. She was leaving her job to actually go back to school. And she had a 401k through that job, and they actually rolled over her account into just an IRA, which great. However, she didn't realize that her money actually wasn't even being invested for her. It was just sitting in cash for the 3 years that she was back into grad school. And so, kind of jumping off to Kevin's point a little bit, is that if you have multiple accounts at different firms or you're rolling things over, it would be to your benefit and it would be very helpful to have them in one spot. But more importantly, make sure you're asking questions to make sure you're still invested. Because sometimes workplaces too, you have the opportunity for having a lot of your investments handled for you. And if you're rolling that over into another account where someone's not actively managing that for you, or they're just simply putting it in another account for you, and you yourself don't feel comfortable managing that money on your own, you don't want to miss out on X amount of years of not taking advantage of compounding because you didn't know any better. We hear that all the time at Fidelity. People call in and they're like, yeah, I'm invested. And then some phone rep has to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but you've actually just been sitting in cash for all these years, which we don't want to happen to anyone on the call.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. I had a client that happened to, and she was very close to retirement, and for 20 years had been putting money in her 401k and had not actually invested the money. And that is almost like putting food into the microwave or putting food into the oven and not actually turning it on. So you can put money into it, but you want to make sure that it's invested in the funds that fit for you to actually grow the money.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. So, I mean, again, horror story, but I hopefully everyone can learn from that.
Those are great points. I want to talk a little bit more about active investing because as we've seen during the pandemic, there has just been an explosion of day trading, especially among fellow millennials. Kelly, what's your best advice for a new investor who is really interested in stock picking or wants to be invested in a couple of companies, but doesn't have a larger investment strategy?
Yeah, and so you make a very good point. I think the market and the often craziness of life over the past few months has actually caused people to pause and actually take a look at their finances, and in some cases, as you noted, for people to actually dip their toes in the stock market, for the first time. And what's been great is that it is easy to get started. A lot of companies have lowered their fees. You can download an app and get started right away. There are often, it's very cheap. You don't have to be rich. However, I would caution every single person out there that's wanting to do that. I don't want to tell you not to, but the most important thing is to educate yourself. Understand what stock picking means. Understand, what that means to just start getting invested. Understand what that company's going to do. Well, we can never time the market. We never want people to jump in and get over their heads before first getting educated first. And this is very important. And so I would tell everyone, before you're even going to dip your toes, just, give yourself a few check boxes. Okay. The first thing is like, what are your financial goals? Like, what are you trying to achieve? That would be number one. The second is like, do you have an emergency fund? Do you have money set aside in case the unexpected happens? The whole part of this year has been so unexpected. Do you have credit card debt? Do you have an investment strategy? These would all be things I'd definitely caution and ask everyone to consider before they would even dip their toes in investing. I mean, for anyone listening today, you're already taking one of those steps and getting yourself educated. So that'll be my number one ask to every single person who's interested in getting started. Take the time to educate yourself. If you're someone who likes to do research on your own, go for it. Find someone to talk to, a trusted family member or friend. Or as I've already noted, if you do have, workplace retirement account, reach out to your plan sponsor, and that's often a really good place to start.
When people talk about investing, they usually think of stocks. I know I did when I first started, but there are so many other things to invest in and other investment vehicles as far as, I mean, you can still invest in stocks through funds that are more balanced. Kevin, what types of investments should someone look at if they are looking for that long-term growth, whether it's, 10 years down the line for a down payment on a house or for retirement in, 30 years?
Yeah, so your goals, what your goals are really going to determine what your investments are. And anytime that I would sit down with a client, that's the very first thing. I don't think you should not pick your investments or make the strategy. Your goals should pick that strategy for you. And that really narrows down things that you should look into and things that you should not look into. Generally speaking, for someone who is looking for long-term wealth, you're looking to build up for retirement financial freedom, an index fund normally fits for almost everybody in some capacity. So I would say that is like number 1A for the vast majority of people. If you're looking for perhaps saving for a down payment in 10 years or 5 years, you want to get something that's a lot more conservative. And that's really going to vary depending on how much money you need, when the goal is, and how secure and stable is that particular investment.
Absolutely. And I think something to note with index funds is that the idea is to track the market, and you're not trying to time the market or outsmart the market or outperform the market. Would you agree, Kevin?
Exactly, exactly. It is There's a thing that I like to say that it is possible, not probable, to beat the market. Yes, you can in theory. That doesn't mean that it is easy to do or that the vast majority of people actually do that. So that's the thing that you want to realize, that over time, it is extremely difficult to beat a regular plain index fund over 5, 10, 15 years and beyond. In fact, there are also studies that were done, I think actually over the last 2 years, that the vast majority of professional investors, hedge fund managers, about 90 to 95% of them fail to meet the index fund benchmark. So it's, again, possible, but not really probable for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, a lot of people out there, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to put all that effort around analyzing stocks, trying to beat the market. You know what I mean? And I think going back to the term active and passive, a lot of people think of active management as a specific person, a portfolio, a fund manager whose day-to-day job is to do just that. I mean, that's what they're getting paid for. And that's great because they're awesome at it. And we have so many part people doing that. But to take the time and make sure you're researching it, and Kevin, to your point, that's a very difficult thing to do, is not always the best option for everyone.
You can sign me up for average returns. I am happy to get into an index fund that tracks the market instead of trying to spend, time putting all that effort into trying to outperform it, because it sounds like it's just not going to happen. So back to your goals and your goals informing your investment strategy. What types of investments should someone look at if one of their goals is to have income now? Kevin?
Yeah, so this one is going to depend on, again, your risk tolerance and your experience. I really want to emphasize experience because some investors have been doing this for a while. You feel comfortable doing certain things. So I'm gonna go up the levels. So number one, the first thing that comes to mind, if I'm looking for income right now and I'm looking to invest for income, I'm looking at something like an income ETF. So you can Google this anywhere, but any index fund or any ETF that has dividends that pays out regularly, that is one option. Option number two is investing in dividend stocks in some capacity. These are, again, the most popular, not necessarily recommendations, but popular stocks that do this. Johnson & Johnson, Walmart are most popular. And then if you have more experience, and by more experience, I'm saying like 5 to 6 years or more, then you can look at options. Something like a covered call strategy usually pays a decent income. But again, you want to make sure that your risk tolerance, that you know exactly how much risk you want to take, that you have the experience, and most importantly, you learn about these investments and how they would fit with you and where you want to be as an investor.
That's great advice. And I want to shift to talking about handling downturns and market volatility, because during our last Master Your Money call, we were talking about that a lot. And that was back in July. And I feel like we haven't made much progress in that sense in the past couple, 3, 4 months. And we're not sure there is an end in sight or when things are going to go back to normal. So, how should an event like COVID-19 or even the last recession or, current events like the presidential election, how should those things change your investment strategy, and should they change them at all? Kelly?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And as you noted, and I already kind of alluded this a little bit already today, is that market volatility can be nerve-wracking. We get it. It can be stressful. We're not going to deny it. And as a result, it can cause panic and it can, cause people to act more on their emotions than anything else. And so in terms of market volatility, I mean, the good news is that historically, a downturn is followed by, upswing on the other end. So that's good to note. But for a lot of people, it has been an opportunity for people to take a step back and take a look at their finances, something they maybe haven't done in a while. But I would urge everyone, everyone, and this is really dependent on age. I know we focus a lot on younger people, but everyone to continue to stay the course. For those people who are younger, who often don't need that money, their time horizons are longer, stay the course because, as I noted, the stock market, it goes up and down. For those who are older and even approaching retirement, usually you're not retiring that next month. So still, you do have time to weather some of the ebbs and flows of the stock market. Also look at it as an opportunity. Take another look at your portfolio. Use it as an opportunity to further diversify. Take a look and make sure that you're rebalanced appropriately. And definitely make sure that you're allocated your assets in the right way to protect yourself from risk. And I think, as we've touched upon a few times today, turn to a financial advisor, turn to your plan sponsor, or turn to your friends, people like the Kellys and Kevins out there who can help answer some of these questions you might have.
I'd like to add, if we have time.
Please.
Yeah, the one of the big things you want to know is context. Take comfort in the context. For example, the market between 2010 and 2020 up until March, we were up almost 10 straight years. And when the market fell back in March, that was only 30 to 45 days until the stock market started to recover. So you don't want to focus on the 30 to 45 worst days we have seen in 10 years and let it make you forget about the good times that we had for 10 straight years. So you want to have that context and know that long-term investors almost always win. So take comfort in the context, relax a bit, and stay consistent. Those who invested in 2000, which was a dot-com bust, it wasn't the best time. Those who invested in 2001, 2007, 2008, 2009, and now those who were consistent and consistently staying the course are usually the ones who do well. Those who panic, those who pull money out of their 401k and will pay taxes and kind of hit those penalties and things are the ones who are hurt the most. So in most cases, you want to A, stay the course, and B, make sure that you are in your correct risk tolerance. And then lastly, I will say that, did your goals change? Yes, the pandemic really threw a lot of us off. It changed the way we lived. But for me, if my goal is to retire in 20 years, I'm still going to retire in 20 years. So I don't need to actually change my strategy because the goal hasn't changed. I didn't get any closer to retirement other than, the last 3 or 4 months, but the years didn't change. So you want to make sure that check your goals and let that again inform the rest of your strategy.
That feels to me kind of like separating the signal from the noise. A signal to make a change in your investment strategy would be something like your goals changing or your time horizon changing. Whereas,
Right.
all the market news that we're hearing all the time and the economic uncertainty is just noise.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I don't think it's going to stop for the next few months. So
Definitely.
yeah, I think that is terrific. And, often what I tell everyone is like, treat, these emotional feelings like any other part of your life. However, then I realize, oh my gosh, maybe that's bad advice because I don't know how they're handling the other parts of their life. So I think at times when we could probably all do things better. So, definitely pause, take 24 hours to breathe, talk to people. And I think that's a great point, Tanza.
I'm wondering, Kelly, how you set up safeguards so that you don't act emotionally. I know for myself, I have automatic contributions to my 401k and a Roth IRA, and that helps me not, even think about how much money I'm going to contribute because I just heard this, news report of something happening, and I'm not sure how it's gonna affect my portfolio. It's automatic. It does it on its own. I don't have to think about it. There's no emotion. Do you have any safeguards like that you've set up? Or that you recommend other people do?
Yeah, in fact, I do that. Exactly what you just said. I am a huge fan of automating my life where I can. We're all very busy. We all have other things going on. I just alluded to some of the emotions that take over our lives. And so, one of the things that I do is automate a good majority of my life. I consistently have the same amount of money coming out of my paycheck every 2 weeks that's going to my 401k. I'm a big fan of dollar cost averaging that's going into my brokerage account that account for some of my longer term goals. I put the same money in each and every month. It's going in the same mutual fund, so I don't really touch that. I think the other thing too is that being in financial services, I have the luxury of talking to others to help calm me down. And I'm sure, and Kevin and Tons, I'm sure you guys get this all the time. The amount of friends and family who come to me and like, well, you're in finances. Can I ask you a quick question? I do that to my colleagues all the time. So that's definitely a safeguard is, talking to people who are more experienced, leaning into my education and also learning from my mistakes. As I alluded to in a previous podcast or even today, I did not invest in the first 401k that was offered to me because I graduated in the recession. Someone was telling me money's coming out of my paychecks going to the stock market. And I said, heck no. So I'm someone who's been able to learn from that and I hold on to that and I lean into history as Kevin alluded to. And that's really helped me along the way.
You just mentioned reaching out to colleagues or family and friends or, trusted sources for advice or information or kind of to bounce ideas off of when it comes to investing. When should someone consult a professional or seek financial help if they're, trying to refine their investment strategy or their finances in general? Is there a certain asset level? Is there a certain income level that makes sense? Or can someone seek out help from a financial planner at any income level? Kelly, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I do know that income and fees can definitely play a part in it. And one of the things that, you can definitely do for free is talk to families and friends who are in the industry. And on that note, I would say it's never too early. In fact, that's something I would tell everyone to consider before even placing that first investment. I think that's really important. The second thing is that if you do have access to a workplace retirement account, you can often call your plan sponsor. You can often call someone who works directly with that plan and reach out to them to ask questions. The third option too is that you can reach out to financial professionals, just for introductory conversations. You can ask what those fees are. You can turn to bloggers. You can turn to people for free who, give all sorts of advice. I mean, one of the great things about investing is that you don't have to be rich to get started. And there's plenty of access right now to reach out to people for help. Now, because that can be both a blessing and a curse, because a simple Google search can lend thousands and thousands of options. That's why I would always recommend often starting with someone that you trust to start off with. And to piggyback on your question, I don't think it's ever too late to do that.
Yeah, I think it's important to go to someone when you feel comfortable, and then there are tons of books. I know you and I know Erin Lowry, and she just finished another book on investing. Is a great place to start as well. But I definitely think it does make sense when your situation becomes a lot more complicated. And as a former advisor, this is when I start to see a lot of people coming in, whether it's marriage, divorce, having kids, just bought a house, just graduated, want to figure out the student loan debt situation. The advantage of going to talk to someone, even if it's going to a book resource or a magazine or actually walking in and talking to someone, a CFP, a financial advisor, is because they have seen these situations dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and you may only get to do this once or twice, and you want to make sure that you get that situation right. So number one, go with someone that you trust. Go with someone that asks you a lot of questions. You don't want to walk to a financial advisor and they just talk at you. They need to be asking you questions and understand what your goals are, because it's not going to be a cookie cutter situation. Where you are in your life and what you're trying to do is always going to be different than the very next person that they're going to see. So make sure they're asking you questions. Make sure that you get the help that you need at the level that you need it. Not everyone needs to have a financial planner at day one, and that's okay. Some people need it sooner than others, but do what works for you, get the advice that you need, and make sure that you're making the best decision that you can.
We have a question from the audience. Someone's asking, how do you know how much to contribute when investing? And my answer to this would be, consult a financial planner or a financial advisor, as you just mentioned. But what if someone doesn't have those resources? Do you have a suggestion of where someone can start and how much they should contribute? Kelly?
I would say before even thinking about dollar amount, I would just kind of do a quick check the box before you do so. Number one, just make sure you already have an emergency fund set up. I think that's really important. Always prepare for the unexpected. Number two, if you aren't already, make sure you're contributing enough into your workplace retirement plan to get the match. And for those of you who might not have heard that term or confused by it, what that is, it's money that your employer is giving you towards your retirement. For example, they sometimes say if you contribute 7% of your paycheck, we'll also do the same. That's free money. Never leave free money on the table. So if you have the opportunity to take advantage of your employer match, make sure you're doing that before putting more money into a separate investing account. And then the other thing I would say, again, even before, consulting a financial planner is that, and I already kind of mentioned this already, is that you don't need to be rich to get started. You don't need very much to get started. And in fact, the earlier you get started, time can be on your side. Sometimes I've heard people say to me, well, I only have $1 or $2 to get started. Like that's not enough. But I just challenge you guys this because Kevin, actually, I don't know if you remember, we were on a panel once, and this girl, Ashley, who was on the panel with us, said something very interesting. She was like, "What if I gave everyone in this audience $1 today for the next 20 years? Would anyone say no?" No one would say no, because even though $1 doesn't seem much in terms of the investing scheme, if you think about it that way, it's like, oh, wow, I would never say no to that amount of money. So you can get started with very little. I would just urge before you do that, just make sure you do your research, get educated before you do that. Because honestly, as we've already talked to, there is no one amount. There is no one size fits all. So it really depends on your current situation and more importantly, what those goals are.
That is a huge misconception that I hear all the time, which is that you need to have a ton of money to invest. And we did a survey actually for this Master Your Money pillar on investing, and a huge amount of millennials said that they don't have enough income to invest. And I think that that is really just a mistake because, like you said, you can start with $1, you can start with 2% of your paycheck or whatever it may be. Kevin, you work with new investors through your programs that you offer at Building Bread. What other misconceptions do you see?
Yeah, I think again, the money thing is probably the number one biggest misconception. I would say that it is relatively new though, that we have fractional shares for individual investors. I think Fidelity just released their Fidelity slices like not too long ago, early this year. So it is relatively new, but that is the key because 10, 15 years ago, you did have to have an account minimum. You did have to have thousands of dollars, and that's no longer the case. So number one is the money thing. Number two is the knowledge. Yes, you do want to educate yourself, but you don't have to be an expert on day one. You can start in something simple, and the more advanced you get, the more you can do as an investor. I like to say that it's a difference between driving a car and being a mechanic. For you to be a successful, normal investor, all you need is a driver's license. You don't have to build the car. You don't have to be a mechanic. You don't have to be the world's best expert and have a master's in finance to start investing. It starts with simple things. If you want to become more advanced, you're more than welcome to, but you don't have to do that to get started.
Can I just add one more thing, just given today's audience? And Kevin, I'm not sure if you've heard this as well. I often hear that investing is also only for older people sometimes. And I'm like, no, you do not need to be older to get started. You are not too young to get started with investing. So a plug to all those, millennials out there who are listening to this, or millennials or younger even who are listening to this, is that you don't need to be older to get started with investing. In fact, if you're younger, time is on your side. You can take advantage of compounding interest, and that's something too that I hear all the time.
Yeah, those who sit in the shade today were the ones who planted seeds years ago.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
I love that. So, since we're talking today about being a smarter investor, I want to hear from both of you. What three things, or if you have more to share, but let's start with three things that a smart investor does. When I say this, I think of things like something a smart investor doesn't do is probably sit around and study stocks and study charts and do the kind of things that professional managers do. Not everyone has to do that to be a smart investor. So Kevin, why don't you get us started on some things that you think smart investors always do?
Yeah, the benefit is one I've seen I would say more than 2 dozen millionaires. So, and being an advisor, I get to ask the questions like, "Hey, how did you do this?" So number one is they start early. They start at the earliest possible moment. Perhaps it was their first 401k. Perhaps it was stocks that their grandparents helped them start with. But they start as early as possible. So that's number one. Number two, they're patient. They are consistent. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And then lastly, they're not looking for a lotto ticket. And that's what I see a lot, especially now, especially along the millennial group too, where we're trying to look for the next big thing. We're trying to always find the next Tesla, the next Google, the next what have you. That's not where the money actually is. It feels like it really does, but in reality, it's that slow, consistent, patient investment. So number one, not looking for a lotto ticket. Smart investors don't do that. Smart investors start early, and smart investors are patient and consistent.
Kelly, what do you think?
Ditto. Everything. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I completely agree with Kevin. And what I see smart investors do to kind of jump on that and just add a few more things. I think the first thing is that they do go in having some sort of plan. They're not just, and maybe that goes with the patients. They're not just jumping in just for the sake of jumping in. They ask questions, which I think is really important. The second thing is, and maybe this piggyback on the first thing, is they do take time to educate themselves. They are taking time to educate before they just jump in, even that if that's the simple things, which I think is good. And the third thing too is that they don't panic. They don't panic. They stay the course. They're not necessarily going after the next new thing necessarily, but I think that's also key, is not panicking and definitely staying the course to achieve those goals.
Those are both great answers. I think something I would add is that their smart investors are also diversified or know how to diversify in the sense that they're balancing their risk. Do you think that's true, Kelly?
Yes, definitely. In fact, I would argue that the terms asset allocation and diversification are two of the most important terms that someone should understand before they even get started with investing. I often say this in a lot of the education I do with students before I even talk about stocks, bonds, et cetera, because that's what everyone wants to jump on. What's a stock? What's a share? Let me get into this. I definitely always want to mention those two terms. And really what these both means is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Because if you drop that basket, the eggs break and you can't eat breakfast, okay? So you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. And diversification, asset allocation are tremendous ways to protect yourself from risk. This means never being in a single industry or never just being in stocks. And this is really regardless of your time horizon or risk, if you are more risky or you're not, these are two very important terms that I think to reiterate what you said, Tanza, are important for all smart investors to focus on.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's about getting to your financial journey or getting to that financial destination in the safest way possible. And the way I like to describe it is stocks are like the pedals. Those are going to push you forward. That's going to be the fun part of riding a bike. And then bonds and other things are going to be the brakes. That's going to slow you down when needed. It's going to make things less bumpy, like right now, to help you on that journey. But the older you get, the less pedals you need and the more brakes you need. For example, when I was 15 or really 12, I fell off my bike, no big deal, I'm fine. At 30, it hurts a lot more. I need more brakes than I did 15 years ago. And the older I get, the more protection I want on this bike and on this journey to financial freedom. And that's where that asset allocation comes in. That's where the rule of 110 can come in. And that's where those risk tolerance questionnaires come in, because we're going back, we're retuning that bike to make sure that I can get to my financial destination.
You're full of fabulous analogies. I just want to put together a book of all of them.
I know. And then I was just picturing you falling off your bike and I felt that too. So be careful there.
So we're getting some questions from viewers asking about the differences between types of investments, as you just brought up, Kevin. Someone is wondering the difference between an ETF and a mutual fund. And we have another question about the difference between mutual funds and stocks. Do you want to give that kind of high level differentiation, Kevin?
Yes, I have another great example.
So the
Keep
way
them
coming.
I like this, Sure, sure. So the way I like to describe a mutual fund versus a stock, there are a few ways to do this, but for me, it's basketball season somehow now because of the pandemic. But investing in one single stock is like owning a single team. Perhaps I think that the Lakers are the best team in the world. They win the championship this year, please. So that's one stock. Let's say Apple. But a mutual fund or an index fund, it's a type of mutual fund, can own the entire league. So I don't have to pick the best teams. I don't have to worry about if a player or a team gets injured. I own the entire thing. So a mutual fund can own all technology stocks, all oil stocks, or just all stocks, period. So it gives me a little bit more comfort. It takes the pressure off of me, and it's a little bit safer than investing in one single stock because you never actually know what's going to happen to that company. But if I invest in all the stocks together in a mutual fund, that gives me a little more safety, a little more security, because I don't have to sit there and pick the best one each and every time because I own them all. So that is the benefit of a mutual fund. Now, the difference between a mutual fund and an ETF, they are almost the exact same thing. I like to say they're cousins because they do the same things. An ETF and mutual fund can hold the exact same types of stocks. They both hold hundreds, if not thousands, of different or the same stocks. So for example, you can get a S&P 500 mutual fund, you can get an S&P 500 ETF. The only difference from a regular investor high level perspective is that when you check the market right now, the price of the ETF is going to change every single minute. The price of a mutual fund is only going to change at the end of the day. In most cases, you're going to make the exact same amount of money. In most cases, you're not going to get a huge difference in performance. But again, that's really the high level difference for people like me and you. But they do literally almost the exact same thing if you get the same type.
So, Kelly, do you have a personal investment philosophy? I hear a lot of financial planners say that when they meet with someone for the first time who wants to invest, they get questions about what their investment philosophy is, and that can be something like, I try to beat the market, or I try to outperform the market, or I try to get average returns, or something more qualitative. Do you have a personal investment philosophy, and how do you recommend people come up with their own?
Yeah, so first of all, Kevin, unfortunately, I'm a Celtics fan. So I'm okay with LeBron and the Lakers making it to the finals, but I do hope the Celtics make it all the way and kick your butt. But Tanza, getting back to your question, is, I don't necessarily have a strict personal investment philosophy. Really, how I like to think about investing is I think about it almost less in terms of all the underlying stuff that can help me get there, such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, everything that Kevin just said. But how I look at it is that I like to iterate it in terms of my goals. At the end of the day, money touches everything. It can help us achieve the things we want in life. And so when I'm thinking of investing, I'm thinking about the house I want in 10 years. I'm thinking about, not working until I'm 120 years old. I'm thinking about one day maybe having a kid and putting them in college without them, having all this debt. So that really grounds me in my investing philosophy, that I think about it as a good way to help me reach some of those longer term things that would just make me happy and again, help me live the life I want. And this is what I stress to a lot of, younger people just, who are hoping to get started and really scared about these sort of things, is I urge them to think about investing in that way that can help you reach all the things you want in life. And that kind of helps ground me in the philosophy that I like to practice.
Kevin, what about you?
I do have a philosophy. I think that most investors should have one. And the reason why is because it helps you to evaluate whatever it is you're investing on an easy, consistent rubric. When you don't have one, you just invest in stuff that you see, stuff that you hear about, or whatever you think is the best thing at that point in time. So it can make you very inconsistent. You're going to get very inconsistent results. For example, there are some people who do not invest in certain companies because of how they feel about either the environment or the practices of that specific company. Someone like a Warren Buffett has a very strict strategy of investing in certain quality companies. So it does help you to be consistent. I think that's the biggest thing. And how you come up with one, unfortunately, there is no like hard and fast rule or any guidelines around that, but you really want to evaluate yourself. What are your goals? How do you want to reach those goals? And that's what's going to help determine that. If you're someone who says, look, I want to retire in 5 years, your philosophy is going to be very different than mine, who has or who wants to invest or retire in 20 years. So that philosophy is going to start with your goals and then move from there. You're going to start to find companies and funds that work for you in that particular goal.
I want to shift and talk a little bit about building generational wealth. We actually just got a question from an audience member who's asking about a shifting mindset and any advice you guys have for how to kind of escape that scarcity mindset if someone grew up and didn't have a lot of money or didn't have an influence in investing, and how they can shift that and into a growth mindset and building wealth for the future, if that wasn't an option for them when they were growing up. Do either of you have experience with that, or have you talked to clients that have successfully shifted their mindset from that scarcity place to growth?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of experience in that space. I didn't grow up with a lot of money either. And I think the biggest thing to have that shift is by exposing yourself to others. And there are a bunch of different ways you can do that. Social media is one good way to do it, where you're exposing yourself to different experts that show you what things are like in a different lens that you may not have been exposed to, as well as reading. That's what gave me the mindset I have now. The first financial book I ever read was Automatic Millionaire, and it completely changed my life because I had no idea there was a roadmap to become a millionaire. I didn't know that it was easy or that you could do it through your 401k. I'm looking around like, this has been here this whole time. So had it not been for that book, I may not actually be here today. But that was the exposure that I had that changed how I looked at everything. And we have a very small, loud investor that is storming in today. Say hi. So exposing yourself, that's what I do for my sons. I expose him to things too, like right now, to make sure that he has the mindset that it's going to take to be a successful investor in the future.
Stop. That
So
is the
cute.
cutest thing. Kevin, I met him a while ago when he was very little at one of the events that we did together. He's gotten so big.
Yeah. Yeah, he is very, very large and heavy. Yeah. So, and he has a little sister too. But yeah, this was him. He was handheld then. He is not handheld now.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. And if that wasn't perfect timing, I don't know what is. And I just love everything you said. And Tanza, just to kind of reiterate on your conversation or your question, my parents, Mike and Paul, are great people, but they were never really the ones to teach me about finance. And that's not to say that they didn't help me in so many aspects of my life, but they weren't necessarily ones to go to for financial advice. And then post college, it was kind of like, well, you're on your own. And that's just my story, but I think the broader one is that investing is one way to give people opportunities, that they might not have had otherwise. I also see this through, education and financial literacy, but that's a big part, in what I do and what I know what Kevin does is that we want to ensure that we're giving every single person out there the opportunity to do more and to do better. And again, I think that is, the only thing we can ask for future generations. So
I think that's
Yeah,
a great point. And
I want
go
to
for it,
throw in
Kevin.
one last thing before he goes. Um, but when I was investing, or actually when I first started, before even investing, I worked at Quick Trip, which is a gas station, and I remember the day that I had $2,000 in savings. It was the most money I'd ever had in my life, and I was ecstatic. And I was in high school. I'm like, oh my God, I hit $2,000. This is like the greatest day ever. Well, at this point, he has $4,000 at the age of 2. I was 18 at that point in time, and he's on pace to have close to $60,000 or $70,000 when he's 18, because we started early and because we're focused on generational wealth. And at the end of the day, the point of that is he's going to have more options. He's going to have a lot more things that he can choose from to do, whether it's paying for college without taking on debt, whether it's getting a home at 18 if he chose to, or starting a business. And that's what it really comes down to, is having those options.
I love that. From what you guys are saying, I'm really gathering that, there are no secrets to becoming a millionaire or to building wealth. It's really just about taking that first step and reading that book, or educating yourself, or taking that course, or, tuning into a webinar like this and really putting yourself in the position to be able to do that, because there are no secrets and we all have the opportunity and the power to make that happen for ourselves. So I want to thank Kelly from Fidelity and Kevin from Building Bread for being here with us today. And I want to thank all of you for joining in today's session and taking part and sending in questions. In a few moments, you'll get a survey on your screen, and we'd love if you could take a moment to fill it out and give us any feedback so we can make these events better for you. And also stay tuned for an email with a recap of today's event and some more information on our final event of the year for Master Your Money coming in November. Thanks, everyone.